Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash, Yogi revered Pravrajika Ishtaprana Mataji, Mr. Camille Gokar, Ms. Tasmika Pillai, Mr. Akhil Harishan, Mr. CPM Chunu, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal, distinguished guests, Namaskar and welcome to the Swami Vivekananda Jayanti celebrations. Indeed, this program is in association with the Sri Sharda Devi Ashram of South Africa. Swami Vivekananda's life and teachings have encouraged millions across the world. In 1985, the government of India has declared Swami Vivekananda's birthday, the 12th of January, as National Youth Day in honor of the great philosopher and monk. Since 1985, this day has been celebrated as National Youth Day all over the world. Indeed, to commence today's program, I would like to invite Mr. Camille Gokar, a youth member of the Sri Sharda Devi Ashram of South Africa, to speak on the impact of Swami Vivekananda on my life. Namaste and welcome, Camille ji.
I bow to Vivekananda, the lion amongst men, brilliant with the rays of a million suns, who has nothing but the sannyasin's loincloth on, who is dancing the violent dance of Shiva, reverberating the quarters with the impassioned cry of fear not. Revered Pravrajika Ishtaprana Mataji, respected elders, dear sisters and brothers, Om Namo Narayanaya. This morning, I have chosen to speak on something which I feel would be of interest to all of us who listen. How did Swami Vivekananda, lovingly called Swamiji, inspire me? During these trying times, we tend to feel dejected and lost, as life has changed a lot and will probably no longer be the same for many of us. We were always blessed to attend satsangs at the ashram every Sunday and listen to devotional songs and interesting talks. We have learned important lessons of life and have gained much, especially from one of the greatest figures the world has known, and that is Swami Vivekananda, the roaring lion of Vedanta. Most of the youth look up to many celebrities, sports stars, and entrepreneurs as their role models and inspiration for how they want their lives to be at later stages. But for me, Swamiji has been my greatest role model and inspiration over the past few years. His dynamic life, powerful lessons, and never-ending guidance have inspired me, and therefore I am here today expressing my appreciation of this great soul. Throughout his life, Swami Vivekananda experienced many hardships, trials, and tribulations. But it is out of these hardships and challenges that he has given us such important lessons of life. We are so blessed to have these teachings that can help us to be strong and overcome our everyday trials. Today, I will share with you a few of Swamiji's teachings, which I have applied in my life, which have helped me on more than one occasion to overcome new challenges and obstacles. During my final year at high school, I found many hurdles along my path. I often thought that I would never be able to complete my studies. Everything became too overwhelming for me. It felt as though I were drowning in a sea of miseries because of the volume of work, the many hours of studying, and yet not being able to complete the work. I was doubtful about how I will achieve my goal. Then I remembered that Swamiji had experienced far greater difficulties than I did. I reflected on Swamiji's life from the time he lost his dad, then his master, Sri Ramakrishna, also left the earth. The young monks struggled but never gave up hope. They persevered until they became world famous. I recalled Swamiji's trip to America when he attended the Parliament of the World's Religions. Although Swamiji knew no one there and hardly had any money, and everything was so expensive, he was determined to achieve his goal. His dynamic personality and strong willpower made him the greatest figure at the Parliament of Religions, and he became world renowned. Then I came across this quote of Swamiji, who says, "In a day where you don't come across any problems, you can be sure that you are traveling on a wrong path." This means that we are bound to face difficulties, which are a part of life, and we must learn to overcome them progressively. This actually makes us stronger, and we feel empowered to do what is good for us. When I began my tertiary education, life was very different. My first year at university revealed a new dimension of life. Moving away from the comfort of home, I had to adapt to a new environment and begin learning about many different ways. In addition, I found that the lifestyle at university was not so easy. Here we meet with people from a variety of backgrounds, with different habits, good and bad. One has to be very careful not to be caught in wrong company and be misled into bad habits, which take our mind away from study. Moreover, the entire style of learning at university and the way that classes are conducted were completely new to many of us. It is our responsibility to be on time for lectures, prepare our own timetable, and present our assignments on time. Everything was entirely new and challenging. In addition, we had to concentrate on our studies. Then it was exam time, and my mind was still not settled. I remember that I had brought with me a book on Swamiji with the stories about his inspiring life. By God's grace, I opened to the story of Swamiji in America about the power of concentration. I read, "While Swami Vivekananda was in America, some boys were standing on the bridge trying to shoot eggshells that were floating in the water. They failed at every try. Swami Vivekananda, who was watching them from a distance, went close to them, took the gun, and fired 12 times. And every time he fired, he hit the eggshell. The inquisitive boys asked him how he did it. He replied, 'Whatever you are doing, put your whole mind on it. If you are shooting, your mind should only be on the target. Then you will never miss. If you are learning your lessons, think only of the lesson. In my country, boys are taught to do this.'" It was from that moment, with that lesson from Swamiji in mind, that I was able to concentrate on whatever work I was doing. Sometimes we don't realize it, but the simplest of lessons that we have learned can have a great impact on us, especially when it is practical. The lessons that we have learned will always be beneficial to us and will allow us to progress in life. Swamiji has never failed to show us his presence in more ways than one, and always holds our hand, guiding us through life's challenges, even during these times of peril in the world, where everything feels bleak and we feel like we can't go on any further. Those words of Swami Vivekananda will always resound in our minds and in our hearts like the roar of a lion. When life becomes a strain and we feel like we cannot go on any further, remember the powerful words of our Swami Vivekananda. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. May Swamiji, the role model for today, give us the energy and determination to overcome our toughest times. May we derive inspiration from this spiritual giant who is our hero. Jai Shri Swamiji. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Thank you so much, Camille ji, for those profound remarks on the occasion of Swami Vivekananda Jayanti. Next, we will be having remarks by Ms. Tasmika Pillai, who is also a youth member of the Sri Sharda Devi Ashram, South Africa, to talk on impact of Swami Vivekananda on her life.
Namaha Shriyati Rajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swami Neta Pahairine. Om Namo Narayanaya. The talk today is entitled, How Has Swami Vivekananda Inspired Me? Swami Vivekananda expresses his confidence in the youth when he says, My faith is in the younger generation, the modern generation. Out of them will come my workers. They will solve the world's problems like lions. Swamiji himself was the embodiment of youth, dynamism, and vibrancy. The life and ideals of Swamiji are the greatest inspiration for youth in our pursuit of a progressive society. In a short life of 39 years, 5 months, and 22 days, this great monk conquered the entire world with his message and has greatly influenced the direction of many individuals, including myself. Youth is a wonderful time in life. When energy is limitless, human creativity is at its best, and the never-say-die spirit is at its peak. The ideal of social service, as espoused by Swamiji, attracts many young enthusiasts today. We as youth often say we want to do something for society. We encounter the reality of social evils and want to offer our might in solving them. We often dream of changing the world or being the change we want to see in the world. To gear ourselves for this mammoth task and to achieve our desired results as youth, Swamiji has advocated that we possess certain qualities. Firstly, Swamiji champions that we as youth should determine a purpose in life. Swami Vivekananda made the plea for nationwide renovation with the ideals of Tyaga or sacrifice and Seva, selfless service. He described these as the most imperative aspects of shaping the life of young people. What he challenged us to do was to give ourselves a noble reason to live, a lofty ideal to live for, and a higher state to reach within the boundaries of human existence. Secondly, the only qualification that Swamiji looked for in youngsters was to cultivate and nurture the 3 Ps: purity, patience, and perseverance. Let's see these 3 Ps in action through a famous Indian fable. The fable narrates that when the star Swati is in ascendant, the raindrops that pour from the sky have the ability to form pearls. The oysters are aware of this phenomenon, and thus when the star shines, they surface to the top of the ocean. They wait eagerly to catch the precious raindrop. When a drop falls into them, quickly the oyster close their shells and dive deep to the bottom of the ocean. They wait there patiently to fashion the raindrop into a precious pearl. Similarly, we too should possess purity of thought and achievement, patience to understand and focus on the task, and perseverance required in overcoming any obstacles. Only then can we attain the pinnacle of success. Thirdly, Swami Vivekananda believed that working for any social change required massive energy, spirit, and thought. Hence, he requested the youth to amplify our mental energies, physical fitness, and strength of character. What Swamiji wanted from the youth were muscles of iron, nerves of steel, and a mind made of the same material as a thunderbolt. He beautifully advised youth to arouse our social conscience by serving God in man. Lastly, Swamiji advocated for strength in unity. Once upon a time, there was a flock of white doves that flew in search of food, led by their king. One day they had flown a long distance and were very tired. The dove king encouraged them to fly a little further. The smallest dove picked up speed and found some rice scattered beneath the banyan tree. So all the doves landed and began to eat. Suddenly, a net fell over them, and and they were all trapped. They saw a hunter approaching, carrying a huge club. The doves desperately fluttered their wings, trying to get out, but to no avail. The king had an idea. He advised all the doves to fly up together, carrying the net with them. He said that there was strength in unity. Each dove picked up a portion of the net and flew off, carrying the net with them. The hunter looked up in astonishment. He tried to follow them, but they were flying high over the hills and valleys, united in their strength. This charming story teaches us that if we as youth are united in our strength, spiritually, physically, and intellectually, no feat in this world is too great to overcome. Swami Vivekananda said, "A few wholehearted, sincere, and energetic men and women can do more in a year than a mob in a century." It has been rightly pointed out that if you are lying down and reading Swamiji's work, you will instantly sit upright. If you are sitting and reading his writings, then you will stand up. And if you read him standing, you will at once set out towards your mission. This is nothing but the influence of Swami Vivekananda's lively message. Understanding Swamiji and his message and imparting it to youth can be the simplest way to address many problems faced today. May Swamiji bless us so that we as youth can come forward once again by shedding our fears and taking up the reins to shape up a new world. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Thank you so much, Tasmika ji, for those wonderful remarks. I indeed got to learn so much from you and your experiences. Next, we have Mr. Akhil Harishan, who is also a youth member of the Sri Sharda Devi Ashram in South Africa, to render remarks on the impact of Swami Vivekananda on his life.
I bow down to that Viresha who is ever absorbed in the absolute reality, who at the command of Sri Ramakrishna is engaged in the mission of revitalizing Dharma. Respected elders, dear brothers and sisters, and loving children, Om Namo Narayanaya. It is a wonderful honor to have the opportunity to speak on a special occasion like today. Growing up in the ashram with the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Sharda Devi, and Swamiji has really molded and helped me to become the person that I am today. In particular, the messages of the great monk Swami Vivekananda has had a profound impact on my life. Swami Vivekananda's life and teachings are very powerful. When we read about them, we feel that we too can be strong and productive like him. Swamiji inspires us to be truthful, courageous, and fearless. He reminds us that God is seated in our hearts and in the hearts of all beings. Swami Vivekananda is the perfect role model for this age. The early life of Swamiji is the life of an ideal youth. It is the type of life that we, as youth and children of God, should look up to and try to emulate. Swamiji possessed admirable qualities. He had multifaceted talents. He was a good singer and poet, a strong social reformer, a devoted patriot, and above all, a great spiritual leader of the world. For the youth, Swamiji is an icon, an embodiment of dynamism and vibrancy. He ignited young minds by saying, "My faith is in the younger generation, the modern generation. Out of them will come my workers." The essence of his teachings are love, compassion, and the service of humankind. Today, youth are facing issues that did not exist even 20 years ago. The constant social media demands, peer pressure, and living up to a certain standard. Everyone wants youth to be the best in their field. Parents push them to get good marks. Teachers expect the best performance, and society wants them to be useful and successful. As a result of such pressure and a lack of support, many youngsters are not very clear about the goal of life. They also have their limitations as they are intellectually immature with strong emotions and many desires. They need guidance, but they do not want to listen to those who give lectures and advice. They want to be understood and loved. To face these challenges, Swamiji has given youth many lessons needed to shield us against the harsh realities of life and equip us with the super divine strength that is needed to face the world. Swamiji says, follow everything that makes you strong physically, mentally, and spiritually. Reject anything that weakens you as if it were poison. You must be wise and courageous. Only cowards hide and secretly do the wrong things. Be bold, be moral, be truthful and fearless in following the righteous way of life. If youth are equipped with strong moral values, then they will not be influenced by bad company. Today, there is a tremendous erosion of human values. We are passing through a great crisis, a crisis of character. We see violence, corruption at many levels, abuse of women and children, murders and misdemeanors. The main cause is the lack of good character. Swami Vivekananda emphasized character building, particularly on man-making and character-building education. He says, we want that education by which character is formed, strength of mind is increased, the intellect is expanded, and by which one can stand on one's own feet. Swami Vivekananda repeatedly advised, all power is within you. You can do anything and everything. Do not believe that you are weak. Stand up and express the divinity within you. He demonstrated the efficacy of this message throughout his life. Swamiji said that whosoever follows his message will attain his spirit. He further noted, whatever you think, that you will be. If you think yourselves weak, weak you will be. If you think yourself strong, strong you will be. His message was simple yet powerful. In the face of failure, I remember never to step back. On the contrary, our mistakes help us grow. Throughout his life, Swamiji pronounced marching on and never looking back at past mistakes and brooding over them. It is a natural tendency for many of us to give up when we encounter failure. Swamiji encourages us by saying, bless your mistakes. If you fail 1,000 times, make the attempt once more. When we think of courage, Swami Vivekananda comes to mind. Swamiji is an incarnation of courage. His life demonstrates exactly what courage is. Stop running and face the brutes. Cowards never win victories. The famous saying goes, strength is life, weakness is death. We must always try our best to achieve productive goals. The weak have no place here, in this life or in any other. Weakness leads to all kinds of miseries, physical, mental, and spiritual. Swamiji advised you, first, our young men and women must be strong. Religion will come afterwards. This is the way to control the mind. The remedy for weakness is not brooding over it, but thinking of strength. When I feel disheartened, I remember a quote by Swamiji that helps to lighten my load. It seems like a personal message, as if Swamiji spoke these words for me. My child, what I want is muscles of iron and nerves of steel, inside which dwells a mind of the same material as that from which the thunderbolt is made. A very important message of Swamiji is that about procrastination. It is an obstacle on the path of development and progress. Many people talk without any action. Swamiji relentlessly advocated the bold message of the Upanishad across the world. His winning formula to step out of inaction. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Swamiji wanted youth to strive hard to achieve our goals. He wanted us to be inspired every day. A negative attitude makes even small hills look like a huge mountain. But determination and a sense of responsibility will take us to the summit of the mountain. All we must do is realize the importance of these teachings and adopt them to succeed in life. Be a hero. Always say, I have no fear. Jai Shri Swamiji.
Thank you so much, Akhilji. Indeed, we all learned so much from you and your experiences and journey, the followings and teachings of Swami Vivekananda. Next, we will be having a discourse on Bhakti Yoga by revered Pravrajika Ishtaprana Mataji, who is the president and spiritual head of the Sri Sharda Devi Ashram in South Africa. The ashram is a monastic center for women. Revered Mataji has been directing the multifaceted spiritual, cultural, social, and welfare activities of the ashram for the past 37 years. Mataji also writes articles for the ashram's magazine Deepika and other booklets. Mataji also delivers lectures, conducts scripture classes, and provides spiritual and other counseling. Many devotees benefit from Mataji's wise counsel. Namaste and welcome, revered Pravrajika Ishtaprana Mataji, on your discourse today on the occasion of Swami Vivekananda Jayanti.
Om Aim Sarvadeva Devi Swarupaya Shri Ramakrishnaya Namaha. Namaste, Vanakam, and Om Namo Narayanaya to everyone. I thank Dr. Yogi for inviting me to speak on Bhakti Yoga during this important celebration. Sri Ramakrishna says, the path of devotion is the path for this age. The goal of life is to love God and be united with Him. Bhakti Yoga is pure love for the Lord. It is an easy and natural way to God realization. All of us love someone or something with great intensity, but it is essential to give our hearts to God. Then we will find eternal peace. Swami Vivekananda says, Bhakti Yoga is a real, genuine search for the Lord, a search beginning, continuing, and ending in love. One single moment of the madness of extreme love of God brings us eternal freedom. We must remind ourselves that we are divine by nature, and coming into the world, we have forgotten our true divine self. Sri Ramakrishna, the master, says that merchants have their good rice stored away in bags in their huge storerooms. They put enough broken rice outside the storeroom so that the rats do not enter and eat up the good rice. Like the rats who are satisfied with broken grains, we sometimes become satisfied with worldly joys and don't seek that which is the highest and the best within us. The joy of the world and the senses is short-lived. The joy of the Atman, or the soul within, is inexplicable and eternal. It takes some time, some training, and some effort to experience the living presence of God seated in our hearts. There are certain disciplines or methods to follow to know God. We must cultivate some good qualities like viveka or discrimination, vairagya, that is dispassion for the things that give us joy for a short while only. Many things give us temporary joy and we become attached to that. When we don't have it, we are miserable. We must train our minds to listen to and practice concentration. Train the mind to listen to you and practice concentration. Shri Krishna Bhagavan says, the mind is our best friend and the mind can be our worst enemy. As human beings, we can relate to a human or divine form of God. Our scriptures encourage us to have an Ishtadevata or chosen ideal. God is so compassionate and infinite. He allows us to choose any of his many forms. We cannot limit God and say he is only this and nothing more. So we can choose that aspect of God that we love best and give our hearts and mind to that. We have infinite number of devotees who realized God through Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. The devotion of Radharani and the gopis of Vrindavan is well known to all. Surdas, the blind mystic who was blessed with inner vision by Sri Krishna. Saint Tulsidas Ji and Valmiki Ji, who wrote the Ramayana, and there are many others also. Mirabai was a very great devotee of Sri Krishna who experienced much suffering, yet her devotion to God never wavered. There are various relationships between God and his devotees. Our scriptures recommend a master-servant relationship like Hanumanji and Sri Ram, a mother-child relationship like Sri Ramakrishna had with the Divine Mother, and also that of the Beloved. Mirabai looked upon Sri Krishna as her beloved. Her melodious divine songs are famous even to this day. Her poems too are full of spiritual emotion and devotion. They make us feel that God does exist and one can see him. Mirabai was a princess who came from Rajputana. When she was only 4 years old, she saw a marriage procession go by. She asked her mother, "Who is my bridegroom?" Her mother pointed to the little image of Sri Krishna in their shrine and replied, "There is your groom." From that moment, Mirabai dedicated her life to Lord Krishna. When she grew up to be a young girl, her marriage was arranged to the Prince of Chittor. Mira knew in her heart that Lord Krishna was her eternal husband and no one else. At her in-laws' place, only sadhus were allowed to see her at the palace. Unable to understand her divine madness, her husband and his family ill-treated Mira. Once, in the dead of night, her husband overheard her sing with deep longing to her beloved Sri Krishna. The prince ran into the room and shouted, "Where is the thief who has stolen your heart? I shall kill him." Pointing to her beloved Krishna, Mirabai calmly replied, "There is my Lord. He is the thief who has stolen my heart." Her father-in-law too plotted to end her life. He sent her a cup of poison, saying, "This is nectar for your Lord." Mira offered it to Sri Krishna and drank it as prasad. All were amazed to see that nothing happened to her. He then sent a venomous snake in a basket, saying that it was a garland for her Lord. When Mira opened the basket, it turned out to be a garland of beautiful flowers, which she adorned the Lord with. She was in divine ecstasy, her mind completely merged in the Lord, so she didn't have time to be angry with them or feel sad. A bhakta or devotee absorbed in the thought of God depends entirely on him. The Lord protects such a devotee and takes full responsibility of him or her. One who has completely surrendered to God is strengthened by God's love. Finally, Mirabai went to Dwaraka, where Lord Krishna had spent his last days. She entered the temple, sang to her Lord, and merged into his form. The stories of saints and devotees teach us to trust in God and have implicit faith in him. These stories help us to increase our devotion to God. When we experience any hardships, we immediately lose faith in God. Instead, we should increase our devotion to him. How do we manage our emotions? We cannot get rid of them, but we can direct them to God. Then they become helpful and lead to inner transformation. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, instead of being angry with the world, be angry with God for not revealing himself to you. Be greedy for spiritual knowledge and desire only to know God. Then our minds become purified and we will learn to yearn for God. Through prayer, singing the glories of God, and keeping holy company, we can increase our devotion to God and cope with our challenges. The practice of regular prayer and meditation awaken the divine power within and allow us to feel the living presence of God in our hearts. We learn that we are not alone. God is always with us. Lord Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita that it is not easy to think of God without a form. The compassionate Lord has taken infinite forms to allow us to worship him and adore him. Feel, this is my Krishna, my Rama, or my Divine Mother. I love God because God is with me. Then God blesses us with discrimination, knowledge, and devotion. In chapter 11, Sri Krishna Bhagavan says, neither by the Vedas, nor by austerity, nor by charity, nor by sacrifice can I be seen, O Arjuna, in this form as you have seen me. But by unswerving devotion, O Arjuna, can I be known and seen in reality and also entered into. So this is what God wants, unswerving devotion. We see the truth of this verse when we read about Sri Ramakrishna, the master. When he became the priest at the Dakshineshwar Kali temple in Kolkata, he yearned for a vision of the Divine Mother. Each day he would cry, Ma, show me who you are. Do you exist, or am I worshipping a cold stone image? If you are real, why can I not see you? O Ma, another day has gone, and you have not revealed yourself to me. Thus, for 12 years, he yearned and cried for a vision of God. One day, unable to bear the separation from the Divine Mother any longer, he grabbed the sword that hung there and was about to end his life, when the Divine Mother revealed herself to him in the form of unending, brilliant light. He saw light in every direction and experienced divine bliss. This vision proves that God is far beyond the forms that we see. Although the Master prayed to Mother Kali, he saw radiant light all around. We feel inspired to love God when we read about the Master's one-pointed devotion. The Master's simple, pure, and divine life encourages us on the spiritual path, since God does exist and we can experience his living presence. When young Narendra, later Swami Vivekananda, asked the Master, Sir, have you seen God? The Master replied, Yes, I see God more clearly than I see you, and you too can see him. Man cries for so many things, but who weeps for God? By weeping for God, the impurities of the mind are washed away, and one realizes him. The mind is like a needle covered with mud, and God is like a magnet. The needle cannot be united with the magnet unless it is free from the mud. Tears wash away the mud, which is lust, anger, greed, hatred, and worldly desires. As soon as the mud is washed away, the magnet attracts the needle. That is to say, man realizes God. Only the pure in heart can see God. We are so fortunate that M. Mahendranath Gupta, the author of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, recorded whatever the Master had said. It has become a modern-day scripture which clears our doubts on many spiritual questions. We may ask, how can we purify our minds? The Master replies, suppose you have a jar of dirty water. Keep pouring clean water into it, and the dirty water will soon overflow. Similarly, as we fill in fresh, stimulating, encouraging thoughts in our minds, we overcome negative qualities like lust, anger, pride, and jealousy. The wrong thoughts, which cloud our vision of God, ultimately leave us. Our divine nature becomes manifest, and we enjoy supreme peace within. The Master also explains, when you stand under a tree and clap your hands, the birds perched on the tree will fly away. Similarly, clap your hands and sing the sweet names of God. Then the birds of unwanted thoughts will fly away. These are practical examples to guide us in life. Without controlling the mind, our thoughts will run about like unchecked wild horses without a rider. By training and guiding our minds in the right direction, we become free. What is higher than the mind? It is the soul or the Atman. Through prayer, God guides us so that our inner conscience will not allow us to do wrong actions. The Master says, Bhakti is to adore God with body, mind, and words. With body means to serve and worship God, go to holy places, hear the chanting of the glories of God, and behold the divine images. With mind means to contemplate and meditate on God and to think of his divine play. With words means to sing and chant his name. Thus, all our activities can be offered as worship to God. Whether we offer flowers in the shrine, or wash dishes, or cook, or do office work, all of these can be offered to God. When we do these selflessly, we become free from bondage. Work done with the right attitude gives us inner peace and contentment. A devotee once asked Sri Ramakrishna, how should we live in the world? The Master replied, repeat God's name and sing his glories and keep holy company. The mind cannot dwell on God if it is immersed day and night in worldliness, in worldly duties and responsibilities. It is most necessary to go into solitude now and then and think of God. To fix the mind on God is very difficult in the beginning unless one practices meditation in solitude. Always discriminate between the real and the unreal. God alone is real. God alone is the eternal substance. All else is unreal. That is to say, it is impermanent. By discriminating thus, one should shake off impermanent objects from the mind. The next question is, how should we live in the world? And the Master answers, do all your duties, but keep your mind on God. Live with all, with wife and children, father and mother, and serve them. Treat them as if they were very dear to you, but know in your heart of hearts that they do not belong to you. Do all your duties in the world, but keep your mind on God. If you enter the world without first cultivating love for God, you will be entangled more and more. You will be overwhelmed with its danger, its grief, and its sorrow. And the more you think of worldly things, the more you will be attached to them. Our mothers first rub their hands with oil and then break open the jackfruit. Otherwise, their hands will be smeared by the sticky, milky substance. So, first secure the oil of divine love, and then set your hands to the duties of the world. Sri Ramakrishna gives us beautiful practical examples. He also says, the world is a mixture of sugar and sand. Be like the ant and select the sugar only. In other words, do what is good for you and your soul. Do not indulge in bad habits, as it is very difficult to get rid of them. Select the best to improve our lives. Lord Krishna says in chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, he who hates no being, who is friendly and compassionate to all, who is free from the feeling of I and mine, even-minded in pain and pleasure, and forbearing, he, my devotee, is dear to me. The Lord promises us, those who always worship me with single-minded devotion, meditating on me, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they already have. Once, Swami Vivekananda was traveling by train. He had not eaten for some days as he had no money. He sat quietly in his compartment, contemplating. A rich businessman then entered. Seeing Swamiji, he began to taunt him. He said, these young fellows are so lazy. They put on the garb of a monk so that they do not have to work. They waste away their lives doing nothing. Then he said to Swamiji, young man, see, I have hot food to eat and cool drinking water. I earn money, and so I have all these good things. You do not work. You sit idly, therefore you are starving. Go and find a job and work like me. Otherwise, who will feed you? Do you think God will feed you? Swamiji did not reply. When the train stopped at a station for some time, a sweetmeat vendor came running. When he saw Swamiji, he said, "Oh, Swamiji, please come and eat some food." Swamiji was perplexed as he did not know the man. The vendor explained, "Swamiji, you are the person I am looking for. I was taking a nap after my meal when Sri Ram came in my dream and said, 'You are resting here while my son is starving at the station. Go and feed him.' Taking it to be a mere dream, I turned around and slept again. Sri Ramji got me up and scolded me. 'Go and feed my son. He hasn't eaten for some days. Swamiji, please come and eat this. Otherwise, my Ramji will scold me.' The businessman was flabbergasted. He prostrated to Swamiji and asked for forgiveness. He said, 'Now I understand that God takes care of his devotees.' Sri Sharda Devi says, God is one's very own. It is an eternal relationship. One realizes him in proportion to the intensity of one's feeling for him. Do not be afraid. Always remember that God is protecting you. chant his holy name. Shri Krishna Bhagavan says, fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, sacrifice to me, bow down to me. Having thus made yourself steadfast in me, with me as the supreme goal, you will come to me. May God remove our ignorance with the luminous lamp of knowledge. May we find joy in repeating God's sweet name. May God always bless us with love and devotion to his lotus feet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for that profound discourse on Bhakti Yoga. We indeed definitely got to learn so much and had such a deep insight on the teachings and practices of Swami Vivekananda. And indeed, we got to learn and absorb this knowledge from you. With that, we've come to the close of today's program. And I'd like to invite Mr. C.P.W.M. Chunu from the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban to render this evening's vote of thanks.
Namaskar and greetings to all of you. On behalf of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, I am honored today to deliver a vote of thanks on today's program, Swami Vivekananda Jayanti celebrations. Allow me to thank our online guests who took part on today's program. Mr. Kamal Gokul, who is a youth member of Sri Sarada Devi Ashram in South Africa, for his remarks on the impact of Swami Vivekananda in his life. Secondly, allow me to thank Miss Tushmika Pillai. She is also a youth member of Sri Sarada Devi Ashram in South Africa, for her remarks on the impact of Swami Vivekananda in her life. And thirdly, allow me to thank Mr. Akhil Hirikishon. He is also a youth member at the Sri Sarada Devi Ashram in South Africa, for his remarks on the impact of Swami in his life. Lastly, allow me to thank Revered Pravrajika Ishtaprana Mataji. She is a spiritual head of Sri Sarada Devi Ashram in South Africa, for the discourse on Bhakti Yoga. So to Kamilji, to Smikaji, Akhilji, and Madaji, Dhanyavad for rendering such a wonderful remarks on today's program. To Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Sristi Harinarayan, Sri Piyush Kandelwal, Dhanyavad for taking part on today's program. To our online participants, we would like to say on behalf of Swami Vivekananda, Dhanyavad for taking part on today's program. For more information on cultural activities organized by Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, you are kindly advised to visit ICCR in Durban Facebook page. Once again, good people, to our online guest, Kamilji, Tosmikaji, Akhilji, Mataji, Dhanyavad for taking part on today's program. And to all of you, have a wonderful evening. Namaskar.